to solve. United Saint Lucians. We are the People's Parliament. All rise. Tonight we'll start with some prayers by Miss Malcolm. Afterwards.
Hear our cry, O Lord, and listen to our prayer. Good and gracious Father, you are our all in all. I come to you tonight, saying thanks for this day. Thank you, Lord, for the gift of life and all the blessings you have bestowed upon us. St. Lucia belongs to you, dear Lord. Bless the land that gave us birth. Bless all your people. May we live united, and you open the floodgates of heaven and pour out your blessings on this land. We pray for our opposition leader, our district rep, Honorable Alan Chastanet, a unique individual. Bless him with good health, happiness, patience, and peace. Lead him in the direction you want him to go. Bless his family. Keep them united. Give them the vision that will help him move St. Lucia from the drain and rise to new heights. Take full control of our proceedings, Lord, and may the message tonight reach the length and breadth of St. Lucia. We pray in Jesus' name.
Amen, amen, amen. Thank you, Miss Malcolm. Amen. Miss Malcolm, can we sing our national anthem?
Sons and daughters of Saint Lucia, love the land that gave us birth, land of beaches, hills and valleys, fairest isle of all the earth. Wheresoever you may roam, love, oh love, island home. Gone the times when nations battle for this Helen of the West. Gone the days when strife and discord dim the children, toil and rest. Dawns at last a brighter day, stretches out a glad new way. May the good Lord bless our island, guard us on from woe and harm. May our people live united, strong in soul and strong in arm. Justice, truth, and charity, all ideal forever be.
Thank you, Miss Malcolm. Welcome Ms. Frederick to the welcome remarks. Everybody have a seat, please.
Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir tout le monde. The constituents of Miku South is honored to have all of you to this, the People's Parliament. Welcome, everyone who've traveled from far and near to witness this special occasion. Welcome to our well-loved, Honorable Alan Michael Chastanet, the People's PM. Mr. Andy Daniel, the party chairman, we welcome you. The best ever tourism minister, Dominic Fede, welcome. The man who transformed the Sulphur City, Honorable Harold Stanislas. A special welcome to you, Mistress Janine Jody McIntyre. To everyone in the diaspora, Mr. and Mrs. Lubin, I know that you're locked on. We welcome all of you. We appreciate all of you. To all well-wishers and invited guests, the entire constituents of Miku South, we ask that you sit back and listen as what that could not be said in Parliament is brought to your doorsteps tonight. Welcome, everyone.
With that, we welcome Mr. Harold to the podium.
The wonderful people of Mikud South, Saint Lucians at home and Saint Lucians in the diaspora, I bid you a pleasant good evening. A good evening on behalf of the leader of the opposition and our team of dedicated men and women who are ever united and focused to move our country forward. The last election campaign by the then opposition St. Lucia Labour Party was not a campaign on the strategic advancement of this country, but rather a campaign based on hate, prejudice, and building fear and anxiety among the people of St. Lucia. They wanted all of St. Lucia to believe that COVID did not impact government revenue, when it obviously did by over 60%. Through their propaganda and lies, they claimed that the UWP government was reckless, and they coined the Madipwete term. But today, we are witnessing, under the leadership of Philip J. Pierre, St. Lucia is going to have the biggest budget in the history of this island, $1.8 billion. And yes, $505 million of that is going to be borrowed for the financial year. The same persons who termed Madi Pwete. What they did not tell you is that we would have borrowed because we had fiscal space to borrow, because of prudent management and stewardship of the economy by Alan Chastanet and the team of the United Workers' Party. The vicious media attacks and campaigns against the United Workers' Party, taking swipes and sensational juicy bites by the then opposition Saint Lucia Labour Party, who tried to downplay the massive focus on the development initiatives by the then UWP administration. But now, the SLP is basking in the glory of these projects and taking the praise for the very works that they opposed in opposition. St. Lucians, I want you to know that the rebounding of the economy of this country was due to the Alan Chastanet-led government's economic reforms. And as such, it was absolutely necessary to borrow in the context of a crisis like the COVID pandemic. So why are we here tonight, St. Lucia? We seem to be living in a terrible time of suppressing dissent and our sacred freedom of speech, which is one of the key hallmarks of democracy, is being trampled upon. Trampled upon by the Saint Lucia Labour Party led by Prime Minister Honorable Philip J. Pierre. Amen. It is clear for all to see that Saint Lucia is quickly turning into a totalitarian regime where they use a technicality to stifle Sky FM, while other radio stations, including some well-known ones, possibly aligned with the current government, continues to operate. Brothers and sisters, we are witnessing the actions of a regime that is vindictive, diabolical, hateful, spiteful, and have not understood what it means to put people first. Bluffers. And last Thursday was testament of that when we saw the most shocking, appalling, and horrifying behavior in the sacred halls of our parliament. St. Lucians, there has been an established arrangement as it relates to the order of speakers in the House only during debate proceedings. Only during debate proceedings of the estimates and the appropriation bill. I want you to understand that the standing orders of the House of Assembly does not say who speaks when. Nothing in the standing orders to say that. It has been custom and tradition among the members that they agree on the speaking order. In the case of the United Workers' Party back in the year 2016 to 2021, when we were the government of the day, we had 2 speakers from the government and then 1 from the opposition until we arrived at a 1-to-1 ratio of speakers. And this was agreed by both sides. That was fair and equitable. I also want you to understand, St. Lucia, that we never dictated who speaks when. So at the 2-1, anyone from the opposition could have spoken. Honorable Philip J. Pierre, back then as leader of the opposition, chose to speak right after then Prime Minister Alan Chastanet. It was his choice. In the current situation in the parliament, we have 2 opposition members and 15 government MPs. Hence, we expect the same level of fairness and equitable arrangement in the order of speakers. But no, the government side, through the leader of government business, has the audacity to tell the leader of the opposition that he must speak at the time dictated by the government. That is, by all accounts, absurdly ludicrous, comical, laughable, and unfair. Again, we saw the clear action of the government dictating to the opposition how they must conduct the manner in which they should speak. The leader of government business cannot deny any elected member of parliament an opportunity to speak in parliament. You cannot. An elected member of parliament can speak anytime he wants by putting on the red light so that the speaker can acknowledge him. This government, ladies and gentlemen, always feels that they have carte blanche to do whatever they want because of the supermajority. So in order to get back at the opposition, they deny Honorable Alan Michael Chastanet the opportunity to speak by closing the debate. Again, because they have carte blanche, what is worse is that they stop their own members from speaking, from contributing. They cut their noses to spite their faces. They prefer to burn a church to kill a cockroach. Yo ka brûler whole l'église pour tuer yon avec. C'est ça yo fait à parlement. They denied Emma Hippolyte, who was supposed to explain to the people of Saint Lucia the high prices in the supermarkets and what can be done to address the situation to bring relief to the people. But more so, they denied her the opportunity to tell the people of Soufrière what are your plans for Soufrière for Saint-Jacques. What do you intend to do for the good people of Soufrière for Saint-Jacques? They denied her that opportunity. They denied Stephenson King, Minister for Infrastructure, the opportunity to speak about the completion of all the good roads, the good projects, which was started by the United Workers' Party. They denied Alva Baptiste, Minister of Foreign Affairs, who was supposed to explain to the nation the uncertain times we are in due to the Russian war with Ukraine and how it impacts Russian access to CIP, one of our key revenue sources. And they did not let the alpha male, the loud mouth, the pit bull speak, just to deny Alan Chastanet the opportunity to speak. Moreover, they did not even take a lunch break. Mischievous, wicked, miserable. C'est un homme misérable. St. Lucians, we are here tonight to begin the budget rebuttal, which was denied to the leader of the opposition, to the People's Parliament, to the people of Mikud South, and to all St. Lucians at home and abroad. They have denied him to speak in Parliament, but they cannot deny him from speaking to the people in the People's Parliament. Tonight, Saint Lucia, it is my privilege to call on the leader of the opposition and member of parliament for Mikud South, the leader of the Torch of Progress and Development, to exercise the right given to him by the people of Mikud South as their parliamentary representative. And the right given to him by the sacred constitution of our beloved country as a duly elected member of the House to rebut the budget estimates of 2022-2023. It clearly seems that the government has no confidence in their own budget. Why else would they be so afraid of Alan Chastanet and what he has to say? If you are so confident of your budget, 15-2, he could speak first, second, last, it doesn't matter. It does not affect the outcome of the proceedings of the House, because they are fearful of what he has to say on this $1.8 billion budget. So it is with much joy and pleasure that I give you, the people of Mikud South, your Member of Parliament, Honorable Alan Michael Chastanet, to address you on the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2022-2024.
The people of Saint Lucia, I thank you very much for this opportunity this evening. Very early, when I attended my first parliamentary session, I took the opportunity to remind the Labour Party that while they may have won a supermajority in the House, in the People's House, they only represent 26% of the people of Saint Lucia. My colleague, Herod Stanislaus, pointed to a very important thing, which is the environment in which the elections took place. Sadly, too many people remain confused. Those of you who were part of the United Workers' Party convention in October of 2020, you remember that I gave a speech speaking about the seeds of doubt. Unfortunately, those seeds were too well established in too many people's minds. And as a result of it, many people stayed home. We saw it in the numbers. Only 51% of the people came out to vote. And of the 51% of the people who came out to vote, 51% voted for the Labour Party. The election was won by 6,000 votes. Grosley, 2,500. Vieux Fort South, 1,700. Laborie, 1,100. So it means that 10 seats were won by 700 votes. 70 votes per constituency. This is not a majority in which you can act so arrogantly and defy the democracy of our country. So it is this budget and some of the actions that we have seen in the early stages of the Labour Party that tell us of what I consider to be the big lie. the big lie is now starting to unravel. The half-truths that were told to the people of Saint Lucia, playing on the fear of many Saint Lucians, who chose to think negatively and thought of the worst things to finish the sentences that were started by the Labour Party. I want to start my presentation this evening making reference to a document that had been made a document of the House, and it's called the 2021 Annual Report put out by the Department of Economic Development. In the introduction of the document, it reads the following: notwithstanding these challenges, the Saint Lucia economy was forecasted to improve by the end of 2019 because of stronger performance within the tourism sector. The unemployment rate declined from 20.2% in 2018 to 16.8% in 2019. And according to the IMF survey in February 2020, more cautious fiscal policy and revenues realized from the Citizenship by Investment program led to a primary fiscal surplus of 2.1% of GDP in 2018, and this account was anticipated to be balanced in 2019. In other words, that when we came into government in 2016, the government had suffered 5 consecutive years of significant deficits. In the people's terms, if I were to compare it to your own household, it means that you were spending more money than you were earning. And what you were having to do now is to go to friends and to the bank to borrow money, not to invest to improve your life, but simply to be able to pay for the bills that you had. So when the then Prime Minister said that something had gone wrong, what he was making reference to was consecutive years of deficits, consecutive years of spending more money than you were earning, and whatever money you were investing, it was not generating any form of economic growth in our country. And within 3 years of getting into government, we had started to reverse that trend, where we now were balancing our budget, and we'd had 3 consecutive years of economic growth in this country. It goes on to say, however, the COVID-19 pandemic has significantly affected household income, as illustrated by the results of the socioeconomic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in Saint Lucia. The survey found that households also experienced significant income losses, with 71.2% of the households reporting a decrease in income from their main source of livelihood. So what does that mean? It means that when COVID hit, it hit everyone. Persons who may have been still employed in the civil service and getting their salary, but the small businesses that they were no longer getting any business. Persons who had small shops, who were vendors on the side of the street, when the country came to a stop, nobody was selling anything. Farmers were suffering. Taxi drivers were suffering. Bus drivers were suffering. Every single St. Lucian felt the impact. More importantly, everybody in the world felt the impact of COVID-19. Therefore, the government of St. Lucia's expenditure policies focused on resources to support the healthcare system in mounting an adequate response to the pandemic. These expenditures occurred at a time of sharp declines globally in tax revenue. In the case of St. Lucia, the international trade taxes were estimated to contract by 22.7%, or 405 million. This represented a loss of 2% of GDP. Consequently, the overall fiscal deficit is estimated to widen to $479 million, or to 10% of our GDP, from 3.5% of GDP in 2019. It means that the amount of money that we lost was 3 times greater than the loss of money that we had in 2019. The government of St. Lucia's fiscal year runs from April to March. So I say that as a backdrop to where we started. I want us to take us back, if I can, a little bit in the history. In 2016, when United Workers' Party came to office on the promise of building a new St. Lucia, we had had consecutive years of no or very little economic growth. The unemployment rate in this country was at 25%. Youth unemployment was at 44%. The country had run deficits, and in fact, the country was not in a position to borrow any more money. Everybody said, you must get your fiscal house in order. And most importantly, something that we have come to associate with the Labour Party, there was no plan. United Workers' Party came into office and decided to implement what was called a medium-term development strategy. We believe in a plan. It wasn't just the idea of wanting to build a new St. Lucia, but a plan on how we were going to do it. And I read again from a report that's called the St. Lucia Macroeconomic Performance and Medium-Term Response, and this was also made a document of the House. It says that St. Lucia's economic growth on the arise is anchored on the core principles of accelerated, resilient, inclusive, sustainable, and equitable shared economic growth. According to the Prime Minister, myself, the strategy leverages the island's Creole heritage and uses the tagline, "Nu tout ensemble," signifying that no segment, no individual, whatever their creed, religion, education, or political affiliation, will be left behind in our collective economic journey. The strategy contains 6 key result areas, 3 based on the social sector, citizenship, security, education, and health, 3 based on economic sector, agriculture, infrastructure, and tourism. In addition to the 6, there are 4 cross-cutting thematic areas integrated throughout the strategy: climate change and disaster resilience, productivity and competitiveness, gender mainstreaming, and social protections. In the area of tourism, funding for the village tourism, which now the government wants to call community tourism, that's all that's changed. Funding for the Village Tourism Initiative has been secured under the OECS Tourism Competitiveness Project. The districts that will be targeted under this program include Gros-Islet, Anse-le-Ray, Soufrière, Choiseul, Labrie, Vieux-Fort, Micoud, Dennery, and Babineau. The project will commence with a selection of pilot communities, namely Soufrière, Gros-Islet, and Anse-le-Ray. Why? We have learned that, sadly, when we introduce new ideas in St. Lucia, there's always a tremendous amount of resistance. So we chose critical constituencies. There already was village tourism in Gros-Islet, the Friday night fish fry. There was already in Anse-le-Ray, and there was already in Soufrière. And so what we wanted to do was to go in and strengthen those communities and show by how fixing up the infrastructure, raising the standard of the villages, that we could make sure that more St. Lucians in the villages could benefit from tourism. One only has to go to Anse-le-Ray and see what Dominique Fede has already begun in the waterfront of Anse-le-Ray. One simply has to be able to go to Soufrière and see what now a real village tourism is. And an intense amount of work had already begun in Groselet, starting with roads, starting with the T village concept. People of Saint Lucia, this was not a government that simply put words together. The concept of putting people first was always ingrained in everything the United Workers' Party did. Because we were elected by the people, for the people. I want you, if you have not already been, to go and see the T village that we built in Groselet. An idea where persons could come off the road and properly park. An area in which vendors could be under shelter. An area in which a person can rent a space and have a document to say that that was their space, in order to go to the bank and borrow money to build a permanent facility on that space and to establish their own brand. These are not words on a paper, but they were manifested in projects on the ground in Saint Lucia. We said that persons who are getting involved in tourism, it wasn't just about concrete. But how many people wanted to open up a little guest house, but have never run a guest house? And so the idea was to create a company called Village Tourism Incorporated. And that company would reach out to all St. Lucians, provide them with an accounting system for free, provide them with a platform to market their property for free, provide them with expertise on how to decorate your place, on how to put together your menus and improve the quality of the product that you had. And that not only foreigners but St. Lucians could pass by and say, I am so proud of my people in St. Lucia. A large part of providing that support for those small business persons is so that they could do something that was necessary, to put together a business plan to go to the bank to borrow money. We did not just provide the technical support. We did not just put the physical infrastructure to improve the quality of your small business, but we also put money into the St. Lucia Development Bank that you could borrow money on concessionary terms in order to build your own business. In terms of infrastructure, if you have a business and only 5 people can be in the front or in your store at any one time, and there's a long line of people waiting to come and buy your bread, some of those people waiting in line eventually are going to leave because it's taking too long to get the bread. This is what we focused on in St. Lucia, was building the capacity of St. Lucia to grow. So when we analyzed the situation to figure out why is it that St. Lucia had suffered and had not grown since 1997? Why? And when United Workers' Party came in, the growth that we got was based on the poor performance of the Labour Party. It was because the capacity of the country to allow businesses to grow wasn't there. There's no greater example of the half-truths that the Labour Party gave us. You remember that the Labour Party said, when we were building roads, people cannot eat roads. But it took somebody from my own constituency to tell me, Mr. Chastanet, don't mind what they say, you need roads to eat. Yes. The persons in Blasha and Chic that were being denied access because once you got to the end of there or so, you did not want to go any further, now those businesses are going to do better. The people who went to the Saltibus and decided they could not take that road, the people who went to Park Estate, and the people who lived in Park Estate and were being denied an economic opportunity because the roads to their properties were so bad, United Workers' Party was allowing everybody in this country to eat. So the capacity problems we had in roads, and let us think about it for a moment. How is it that a government came in under the most difficult times and fixed up 1/3 of the roads in Saint Lucia? And we did it in less than 5 years. And we did not put this country in debt to do so because we did something that was fair. We introduced a gas tax. And we allowed that money to go into a lockbox in order to pay for the roads. So we didn't have to wait for anybody else to give us money. We had our own money and fixed up our own roads. Here in Micoud South, how many promises were we made and for how long that we would get water in our homes here in Tiroche and in Blasha? And how many stones they gave us to hold. It was United Workers' Party that came in and said, we will get it done. When we came in, a project was started in Dennery. We didn't stop the project. We doubled the size of the project. All the people in Vieux Fort had become accustomed that when it rains is when you don't get water. Now we are investing almost $100 million to quadruple the amount of processed water that the people in Vieux Fort South and Labrie will be able to get. United Workers' Party. And while 85% of St. Lucians may never go to the airport, many of them go to pick up their families when they come to that airport. And how embarrassed we are about the state of our airport. And what did we do? We decided we're going to triple the size of Unora International Airport. And successive governments that gave us stones to hold and made all kinds of promises and excuses as to why the project would not get done. In 3 years, the project has begun. Healthcare. What a disaster in St. Lucia. The greatest crime that has been committed against St. Lucians is the number of government administrations that have come and made all kinds of promises as to how they're going to resolve the problems of healthcare. You had a government that was in office that received grant money from the Europeans. The hospital was finished, yet they couldn't open the hospital. Why? Because they could not find the money to pay to operate the hospital. People say to me, Alan, when you get up on a podium and you speak, sometimes you use numbers and you say things that St. Lucians don't understand. I don't believe that to be the case. It was costing us $35 million a year to operate Victoria Hospital. All of you know. You either been there or had family that went there. It was not a first world hospital. It was not a second world hospital. It was not a third world hospital. It was a fourth world hospital. Not the people. The building and the lack of money made the hospital a fourth world hospital. So if you could not even find money to operate Victoria at $35 million, where were you going to find the money to operate OKEU at $70 million? United Workers' Party said we must resolve this issue. And what we said is that government will continue to pay the salaries for the workers. That government will pay for the utility costs at the hospitals. Government will pay for the capital costs, whatever new investments we have to make. But we would introduce an insurance program in which every single St. Lucian would contribute to that insurance program. So you would have your own card. And that when you went to the hospital, you did not have to ask whether I owe any money. You didn't hold your head down in shame because you were in pain, but you are embarrassed because you owed money and you don't even know where you're going to get the money to pay for the prescription. We said we are going to fix this. And we spent 5 years putting those programs in place to fix it. When it was in the most impossible time to open up OKU, which was in the middle of the pandemic, United Workers' Party did it. Here in our own constituency, in Deriso, the healthcare facility was broken in more times than if a bank would be broken into. The nurses were scared to stay there by themselves. When one of the nurses had to go out, the other nurse left and left the place unattended. How many times people broke into that property? United Workers' Party found the money and fixed up 14 healthcare centers throughout the length and breadth of this country. Improved security systems, generators, better refrigerators, better equipped than they've ever been before. United Workers' Party decided that the people in the South deserve better than what we had. And we looked at the hospital that the government was building. None of us could figure out what they were doing. The reality is, there's no document to show us that they even had a plan for St. Jude's. The only plan was to keep spending money. But there was no plan on opening up St. Jude's. It's a true story. April of 2016, they wrote to Kenny Anthony and said to him, it was going to take another $100 million and another year in order to be able to finish St. Jude in his own document. So when the Labour Party will tell you that the new hospital that we've built has cost $100 million, so let's put it in perspective. Those of you who are in the South, or those of you who don't believe what you read in the newspapers or what you hear on TV, and have taken the opportunity to go down to View Fort yourselves and see for yourselves, the two buildings are right next to each other. The old building, they spent $130 million on it. The new building, $100 million. There is no comparison between them. And when I hear the Prime Minister embarrassing himself every day, to say, can you imagine, they wanted to move the people in downstairs and they would still have construction going upstairs. Magie. The entire building was finished. What we did not do is to spend any money to furnish or put the dividers upstairs until we knew what we were going to do. But the reality is you have a modern hospital that was built that when the new airport opened up, when your new cruise ship terminal opened up, when the new hotels opened up, that you had a hospital that was big enough to absorb all of that. The cul-de-sac bridge, in order to stop the flooding in that area. The West Coast Road, one of the most important roads that we have in Saint Lucia, which is in deplorable condition. The Millennium Highway, where I am surprised more people have not died. The monies were found, the projects were funded, and work had already begun on those projects under the United Workers' Party. Phase 1 of the highway is already started, and Phase 2 through Ansel-Ray and Canneries and all the way to Columbet in Soufriere are now yet to come. That is part of the borrowing. But most of the money was given in grant monies. I just want to mention a couple of things, because sometimes There were so many things that we did, and I've heard it over and over, the PR of United Workers' Party isn't any good. It's because we spent less time talking and more time working. The Vieux Fort Water Redevelopment Project, $73 million. The Dennery Water Supply, $48 million. The John Compton Dam Rehabilitation, $55 million. Education Quality Improvement Project, so over 16 schools were fixed up, $56 million. Disaster Recovery Program, $77 million. The program for regularizing of unplanned developments, like we have in Angers, $21.7 million. Basic Needs Trust Fund, $16 million. BNTF, $34 million. BNTF 9, $14 million. BNT 10, $10 million. Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, $183 million. This was a project that came into existence after Hurricane Thomas. And when Guy Joseph took over as the Minister of Economic Development, close to $60 million US was unspent. I'm very proud to say that before he left office, all of that money was committed. The road, all the drains that we saw in our constituency came from DVRP. And what did he do? He negotiated with the World Bank that because of COVID, to make the project smaller so that Saint Lucian contractors could benefit from the work. Not big contractors, small contractors from our constituencies. Human Capital Resilience Project, $53 million. OECS Tourism Competitive Project, $40 million. The Caribbean Regional Communication Infrastructure, $16 million. Employment Generation and Private Sector Development Program through TVET, $13.7 million. The Owen King Hospital, which was done by both administrations, $170 million. Under the Republic of China, Taiwan, National Sporting Infrastructure, $32 million. That was grant money. Every single year, the Taiwanese were giving 10 to 12 million US dollars. Successive governments thought of it as only 1 year in expenditure. We came in as a cabinet and we said, no, it's 60 million US dollars. So if you have 60 million US dollars, what is the best way to spend it? And we said, let us fix the sporting facilities of this country. I am proud of what we've done in Dereso, and in Micoud, and in Dennery, and in Soufrière, and in Groselet. And I'm proud of the fact that we had plans for Marsha and the remaining parts of Saint Lucia. Everything was already in place, ready to go. The Constituency Development Program, $43 million. The St. Jude's Reconstruction, $190 million US dollars. The Banana Productivity Improvement Project, $13 million. Expansion of the fruit crop. We came in and we said, let us stop talking about diversification of agriculture. Let's stop talking about how we're going to stop importing food items in St. Lucia. And we identified 7 crops that we believed that we could be self-sufficient in, providing people with greenhouses, hydroponics, and proper training, but more importantly, putting the marketing plans together so that the farmers could focus on growing, and the marketing board would focus on selling. The Millennium Highway, $154 million. That is just some of the projects that were negotiated and finalized on the United Workers' Party. We talk about the housing. Repeatedly, we hear ministers now speaking about housing needs. The persons in Angers have waited almost 25 years to get a subdivision. I'm proud of the fact that before I left office, Cabinet approved the subdivision and approved the prices for persons who had been living there for 30 years or more, approved the price for people who were living there for 30 years or less, and also approved the price for the persons who are second and third generation family members on that site. And almost 200 lots were being created in order for St. Lucians to own their own land. The same thing in Pralet, the same thing in Beauchamp, the same thing in Bel Air, the same thing in Bois d'Orange, the same thing in Volette and Forestier, Choiseul, Lafargue, and PI. Here it is, a new government came into office and found projects going for houses. Projects that did not cost the government or the people of St. Lucia 1 cent. Not 1 cent. But even that, they would plant the seeds of doubt with people to try to convince people that there was something wrong. What is wrong with government owning land, not having the money to put the infrastructure? So the government allows the developer to go onto the land. The contractor puts in all of the infrastructure himself. The roads, the drains, the water, the sewage, everything. And on the first set of lots that are being sold, the developer would get 80% of the money. And the government gets 20% of the money. But as soon as the monies have returned where the developer, the contractor, has recovered his money, 100% of the money goes back to the people of St. Lucia. But more importantly, we had no money. But we were making projects happen. And contractors had confidence in the government of St. Lucia of the day to do that happen. So go to Choiseul, come to Beauchamp, go to Choc, go to Tavern, projects that had been sitting there forever. The idea of doing housing was only an idea. They did not have the ability to execute the program for St. Lucians. We talked about agriculture. Who went to Beau-Saint-Just? When you passed by that land for how many years, what was going on at Beau-Saint-Just in Vieux-Fort? As I said, and people think I'm joking when I said it, the only thing that was growing in Beau-Saint-Just was ticks. And the government of St. Lucia came in, did a deal with DSH. I listened to the MP from Vieux-Fort South speak. He forgets that there is a thing called history. Today, you're saying that you don't know what the deal with DSH is. You've been 8 months in government. You mean to me you cannot have found the contract yet? Or is it you don't want to find the contract? The truth is, and we've said it, where the horse racing track is, and DSH spent their own money, over $100 million they spent on building the horse racing track. And you can see, does the horse racing track make any money? No. The horse racing track was a nucleus to attract other investors. We leased 200 acres of land to them. Leased it. That means it's still our land. But we're giving them permission to invest and to build upon it. We then sold them another 300 acres of land in order for them to build hotels, to build universities, and to build a shopping mall. And they were doing it. But this Labour Party came in and have bullied them, have gotten on like kindergarten children, and made all kinds of allegations. And they're in office. Why can't they show the people the documents to show that they were not telling the truth all along? And United Workers' Party was telling the truth all the time. I want to go back a little bit in history because sometimes people of St. Lucia, we forget. In January of 2020, when all of a sudden the word COVID became known to all of us, and we were watching on TV and seeing what was taking place in Italy, and then later in March we saw what was taking place in London, and then we saw what was taking place in New York. And what did we see? We saw thousands and thousands of people at hospitals, staff being overworked. We saw that loved ones were not able to be with their family members when they were dying. We saw that the nurses and the doctors were overwhelmed. Not only overwhelmed with numbers, but nobody knew how to treat COVID. We didn't even know about face masks in those days. There was no vaccine. A vaccine was something that people were talking about would happen sometime down the road. We also saw that countries that were being impacted by COVID were shutting down their countries, meaning they were stopping people from traveling. So in January, your United Workers' Party did not sit and wait and anticipate what was going to take, to wait to see what was going to happen. We decided to do something about it. Negotiations with our banks that if in fact the country shut down, that they would give a moratorium to everyone. The last thing that you would need is if the country shut down and people lost their jobs, is that people would be even more anxious whether they'd be able to keep their home, whether they'd be able to keep their car, how they were going to keep their student loans being paid. How would they keep their own businesses because they just didn't know what was going to happen. But by putting the moratorium in place, helped settle people in their minds. We understood that the hotels would shut and people would go home. We knew that taxi drivers and bus drivers and everybody in the transportation business, we knew that farmers, everyone would be affected. And we started working with NIC to put in an income support program to help people. We started figuring out what we would do with Victoria Hospital, that we had to open up OKEU and get Victoria Hospital open as a respiratory center. My fellow St. Lucians, in February and March, there were no ventilators in St. Lucia. The ability to test people as to whether they were COVID negative or positive, we did not have that in St. Lucia. We were sending our samples to Trinidad and Tobago. And when I asked the civil servants simply to defer their income, not to take a pay cut, but to say that we're going to be shutting down and we're negotiating to get money because we see there's going to be no income coming in, all those negotiations were taking place in advance of us shutting down the country in April. People were astonished. The government of St. Lucia was the first one to use the term coexist with COVID. We did not wait to see the country shut down to know what the economic impact and the social impact was going to be. We knew that we could not stay shut forever and that we would have to find a way to coexist with COVID. In the months of April and June, where we had 24-hour curfews and people were forced to stay at their homes, we had to find ways to find food, to bring food to people at their homes who had no money because they buy what? They buy groceries today for today. And we knew that and we started our feeding programs and we asked the people of St. Lucia that if you can help, help. Be your brother's keeper is what we said from day one. And then when we decided to reopen the economy in July and open our borders, the Labour Party said that we would destroy lives in this country. And they said that everybody who died, that I had blood on my hands. Every day I was told the same story over and over again. But the numbers are very clear. In 18 months of managing COVID, for the most part with no vaccines, having to start from scratch, very sadly, 88 people died. And 5,000 people were infected in 18 months. The same Labour Party that made all these allegations against us, in 7 months, almost 300 people have died. 300. Over 20,000 people became infected. And remember, they had the benefit of seeing how we managed the situation all along. But it tells you, you have some friends that they do the same thing. Do as I say, not as I do. Do as I say, not as I do. So while we were in government, we were the most wicked government, that we oppressed the people of this country and prevented them from going out. I can say to all of you that we valued lives. We understood the importance of livelihoods, but we valued lives. And the policies of our government shows that we put the cost of lives very high. The revenue of our country dropped from a high of $100 million a month to $73 million. In the month of April 2020, the revenue was $55 million. Put that in perspective. Salaries is $43 million, and to operate the government is another $30. So $70 million just to pay salaries and to be able to operate the government. And we got $55 million. Sadly for us, there was a thing called the redemption of bonds. Many St. Lucians, sadly our citizens, don't truly appreciate what that is. The government of St. Lucia, over the years, had borrowed money by issuing bonds and treasury bills. Many of those persons who had those bonds and treasury bills would simply roll them over year by year. But when COVID came, they needed the money. And so they demanded the government pay them back their money. In 2020, the government of St. Lucia had to find $200 million to pay back bonds and treasury bills in our country. So, what does this budget reveal? The budget reveals that the government told all of us a big lie. Remember they told you that we had borrowed too much money? We were borrow. They said we were bankrupting the country. They said that we were investing things that made no sense and were not going to generate any growth in this country. Well, what did we find out? The money that we borrowed, which was $300 million, if you divide it by 12, is $25 million a month. And I told you, we lost $25 million in revenue. The money that we borrowed from the World Bank and from CDB and the IMF and from Taiwan could not be used to pay for debt in our country. And so we had to use the money to pay for the operating cost, pay for salaries, pay for the operating of the government. And it barely made a contribution to those numbers. We then turned around and increased our overdraft facility. And very importantly, we used payables. St. Lucians who provided goods and services to the government of St. Lucia, we delayed in paying them their money. And our payables went from $30 million to $150 million. And while that helped the government, it didn't help the economy. Because that's money that could have been circulating and put unnecessary pressure on the private sector of this country. But I want to say that we proved, and this budget proved, that that was a lie. The debt financing of this country did not change. Interest payments stayed the same. Principal payments remained the same. So if we borrowed all this money, how come our interest payments didn't go up? And when you now say that our economic policies did not work, imagine last year, this last budget, the revenue went from $75 million up to $85 million a month. And they're now projecting that this year, revenue will go back to $100 million a year. So the programs worked. Building roads, opening up the doors of tourism, they worked and put people back to work. Unemployment when we came in was 25%. With the policies and the programs we implemented during COVID, the worst economic and social crisis of our lifetime, unemployment only made it up to 21%. And I'm sure when they announce the number for 2022, the number will be down significantly from the 21% it was before. So we know that our economic policies worked. And here's the truth. If the Labour Party had not been so wicked, and had not stopped the Rodney Bay Road, had not stopped St. Jude's, had not stopped the HIA airport, if they had not stopped the housing developments, how much further ahead would St. Lucia be today under a united Workers' Party government? That is why the government is in a position to pay the increase in salaries to the civil servants. That is why the government now can put back many of the subventions that were cut. Cut because revenue had been cut. And we had to prioritize who we were going to help and how we were going to help them. Let me give you an example of a half-truth. The Labour Party has continuously told you that there was no distress fund. Okay? There was no fund in the name of a distress fund. We kept on saying that the monies for the distress fund was in the contingency fund. So you have to ask me, I have to ask you, which way are you better off? Having a contingency fund with $500,000 or $1 million? Or having a distress fund with $500,000 or $1 million? And that's the limit? And they can say to you that we have no more money? Or the fact that we were using the contingency fund and almost every single year we were spending in excess of $4 million in supporting people in this country in their hard times. 1 year in particular, the Ministry of Health spent almost $6 million in helping people in this country with their health needs. That is a government that doesn't talk about caring, but actually puts it first. My people, I'm very happy to say to you that the debt to GDP that has gone to 83%, and remember they told you it was going to go to 100%, it hasn't. When they announced the debt to GDP in the appropriations bill, I assure you the debt to GDP will be in the 70s. And if in fact the economy is fully recovered in this year's budget, the debt to GDP will be in its 60s. But that's the half truth that they said to you. Yes, the debt to GDP was going to go up because the GDP was contracting, not because the debt was going up. And this budget has shown that to be the truth. There were some questions that were brought up in the budget debate, and I'm very glad that my very good friend, Mr. Stanislaus, spoke a little bit about what transpired in the House. So if the schedule of speaking, when there was 6 opposition and 11 people in government, was 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, and 1-1-1, I ask you a common sense question. If there are 2 persons to speak from the opposition and 15 people to speak from the government, what should the order be? Should it be 8 speakers and then an opposition, and then 7 speakers and an opposition? Or should it be 7 speakers and then an opposition, and then 8 speakers and then the opposition? How could it ever be that the 2 opposition persons would be expected to speak first? And as Herod indicated, that when we agreed to the schedule, we never told them who was to speak when. This is not a state secret. Ernest Hilaire in the House said publicly for every single Saint Lucian to hear, if I did not speak on a certain time, that I would lose my right to speak. That right is not for him to take away. That is a right that was given to me by the people of Micoud South. And the person that he's insulted, the people that he's deprived of their democracy, are the people from Micoud South who elected Alan Chastanet to represent them in the House. And whether it's Ernest Hilaire, the Prime Minister, anyone, they cannot deprive me to speak. And as I said, you may stop me in this House from speaking, but you will not stop me from the People's Parliament in speaking. And the reason why I wanted to speak, not the last person to speak, that is enshrined in the standing orders, that the last person to always speak is the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance. That is who speak. I wanted to speak before him. Not because I had any agenda, but when people are going to say things in their budget, I believe the leader of the opposition should be given the opportunity to rebut those claims. So things like when they said that there was no shovel-ready projects, that's not true. United Workers' Party left the West Coast Road, we left the bridge, we left farming projects, we left housing projects, we left sporting facility projects, all throughout this country. All they have to do is to continue the policies. But to tell you how limited in view that they are, that they're now celebrating that they are replacing the lights at VG Field. The VG Field, not the field, but the basketball court, doesn't need new lights. It needs a cover. People don't play basketball outdoors and netballs outdoors anymore. We need an indoor facility, and that is where United Workers' Party was going. They spoke about the mismanagement of the Rodney Bay Road and said that there was confusion. There was no confusion. After years of waiting for the Ministry of Infrastructure to move, to build a proper roundabout, and how long did it take to figure out that you could not build a roundabout between the two, Rodney Bay and Baywalk Mall? Because if you built the roundabout there, we would have to acquire houses across the street. That made no sense. So if you all now drive between Sunny Acres and VG, that's exactly what we were building. A roundabout by where the two pillars are. And originally the roundabout was going to go where MJI was. But the Ministry of Infrastructure, and rightfully said, it makes better sense to move it to where the Latrette Road is. Because ultimately that is a road that's going to connect to all the back roads. And that was done. So to suggest there was any confusion, there's no confusion. And this absurdity where they're saying that they're not going to finish the project because they're going to wait to finish the entire road project. So then if that was the case, why did you build from Shock to Sunny Acres and then Sunny Acres to Shock? Sorry, build VG to Sunny Acres first, and then you built from Sunny Acres to Shock afterwards. Years later, you came in and added the second lane between Shock and Sunny Acres. So why can't you go and finish that project and get the money and finish the rest of the project when you have the money? Why must the people of Saint Lucia continue to suffer all that's taking place up north? This is the same government. A minister of finance, a minister of infrastructure. I have to speak a minute about him. A man who's obviously spent more time plotting than working. And I have to ask the question, if in fact he'd spent less time plotting and more time working, how many more roads would we have fixed in this country during our tenure? This is a government that is coming back and introducing old ways. They complained and criticized United Workers' Party because they said we did not continue the laptop program. We did not continue the laptop program because it wasn't working. Why are you giving young kids only a laptop with nothing in it? And that's why we introduced the e-books. And the e-books now make it cheaper for parents. Instead of having to spend $1,000 a year to buy new books all the time, it would only cost you $350 a year to buy the license fee for the e-books. And every single time a book is updated, it's automatically updated on the e-books. And the kids can read the books, the teachers know what they've been reading, they can do their homeworks on the books, and they're using a facility that will now help them in life. And I see now the Labour Party, after we left over 5,000 new e-books to be distributed, they have distributed, but now have gone and spent money to buy more laptops. I want to know, who do they know is in the laptop business why they're buying more laptops for kids? Spend the money on the e-books and give the children the e-books so they can progress in life. They said about nice workers. They continuously say that we fired the nice workers. United Workers' Party never fired any nice workers. The nice workers program was for 3 years. We let it come to its end and we replaced it with NAP. And that is how we created the jobs in the South, in Ojo, and all over the South, and to give young people an opportunity to get a job that once they got their foot in the door, they had a salary for them for the rest of their lives. Little Lies said how we reduced the budget for the creative industries last year to $250,000. Didn't that not make sense? What events were we going to have last year with COVID? But because of the success of the programs and the policies of United Workers' Party, they're now in a position to increase those salaries. The Jazz Festival. We had a jazz festival that cost so much money, $14 million. We took that same budget and we showed them that Saint Lucia's Carnival could become the best carnival in the Caribbean, and it did become that. We showed them what Creole Festival could be. We showed them what independence could be in this country. You want to come back and bring a jazz festival to pay all that money to foreign artists? We proudly believe in our young talent. And we believe our young talent should be given every single opportunity to shine in the world. And if we're going to spend money, we're going to spend money on our own and not on foreign people. This is a classic one. I couldn't believe that what I was listening to. In fact, I had to go back and listen to the tape again. So Ernest Hilaire said that Castries South has been neglected. And reminded us that Castries South was the home of George Charles. Now, the only reason why he knows it's been neglected is because obviously he went to Ancillary, he went to Soufriere, he's come to Micoud South, he went to Micoud North, and he went to Dennery to see what was taking place. But here's the reality, and this is where we have to pick sense from nonsense. Castries South, the last 6 terms have been represented by Labour. The last United Workers' Party person I believe to have represented was Desmond Bradford. That is beyond my lifetime. For those 6 terms, the Labour Party was in government for 4. So it means they represented the constituency and their government was in office. So who does he want to blame for the state of Castries South? But my fellow St. Lucians, that is what the change was. Is that now, without having to say anything, we have the Labour Party under pressure. Because the people will not be fooled anymore. They know what is better. And if they want to see good representation, come back to Micoud South and see what good representation is. Imagine the former Prime Minister, Kenny Anthony, would stand up in a budget debate and talk about the need for a civil status registry in Vieux Fort. And I said to myself, really? You were Prime Minister, Minister of Economic Development, you've represented the constituency for 6 terms, and it's only today that you know that you have to have a civil status? It took Guy Joseph when he came in, not this term, last term as the Minister of Infrastructure, to allow people in the South to go and get their driver's license in the South. They couldn't even do that. And I put it to the people of the Parliament that the Labour Party has no ambition. The young people of this constituency and the young people in the South who had to migrate to the North to get a job, did they not understand the wickedness that they were doing to these people? Did they not understand how they were destroying the households of the people in the South? And so after now showing that we can get Ojo Labs, and we can get ITEL BPO, we can get hotel developments, we can put on the new airport, we can put a new hospital, instead of wanting to continue that program, they've gone back to putting everything back up north. The people in the South don't matter for the Labour Party. Only on the United Workers' Party, we believe in the South. The same Kenny Anthony would try to accuse and say that during 2016 to 2021, that the country was poorly managed. I had to say to myself, really? You were Prime Minister and Minister of Finance for 15 years. When we came into government in 2016, the unemployment rate was 25%. You could not borrow any money and the country was not growing. On the United Workers' Party, we showed that we could grow the economy, reduce unemployment, and even with COVID, the worst disaster that was created outside of Saint Lucia, we still progressed. But you see, Kenny Anthony and the Labour Party could not overcome the disaster of him and the Labour Party, and that is why they suffered. They don't put people first, they put politics first. They only know words. That's why we say they suffer from labor pains. And the evidence is there for all of us to see. Their favorite word, corruption. This is the same government that still has not accounted to the people of St. Lucia for Grindberg. The same government that was accused by Rochamel, by a report on Rochamel. The same ones that practiced cost overruns. The same ones that up to date deny what the relationship with Jufali was. The same ones that deny that people used their offices and acted as frauds. That's what they were, frauds, in using a public office to benefit for themselves. The minister's account, $7 million was spent before the 2016 elections of lottery money outside of what the lottery was supposed to do, directed by the minister. And the same person would stand in the House this last week. I couldn't believe it. Saying that he was a quantity surveyor and that he'd evaluated government projects and questioned the value that people had been given. This is the same gentleman that used and benefited from the minister's account and got paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to oversee projects like the Marigot washroom facilities. $150,000. Where was his skill as a quantity surveyor to know that people of St. Lucia were not getting value for their money? But as I said, do as I say, not as I do. Our government came into office, and the first thing that we did is we amended the Crown Proceedings Act. What did that act do? That act took away the time for persons to be taken to court. So previously, whether it was 2 years or 3 years, the statute of limitations, by amending the Crown's Proceedings Act, any public officer that did anything wrong, regardless of how many more years you discover it, we will be held accountable. We did not do it at the end of our administration. We did it at the first parliamentary session. And that's why I asked this leader, this current Prime Minister, to explain to the people of St. Lucia, how is it that he has certain characters in his cabinet? Is it true that he is the Minister of National Security? Is he also the Minister of Economic Development, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Youth Affairs? So therefore, if he has got all those portfolios, is it true now that both Wayne Gerard and Richard Frederick are helping him with the Ministry of Security, of National Security? And why would we now question why crime is out of control is because of the example of the leadership we're putting in. Is it true that given all the information there is in public about Richard Frederick, is it true that when you came into government that you applied to the U.S. government in order for Richard to get back his visa? And if it is true that the U.S. government turned it down? And if it's true that they've turned it down, what are you going to do now? You need to set the example. If you're going to speak about corruption, it starts in your house first. The examples that you've set, you came in, you have an Attorney General that has convinced the people of St. Lucia, or attempted to convince the people of St. Lucia, that confinement is the same thing as curfew. I want to know how it is that Christopher Hunt's case came to the hearing and the police officer was on sick leave and the magistrate chose to kill the case. How is it the same thing with Jean? Where was the evidence? Why is that happening? How is it that a person in your government would publicly threaten somebody's life and there is no recourse? My fellow St. Lucians, There are people today in Ukraine who are dying for freedom, and yet we choose to stay in silence. Remember, the road to hell starts with the first step. If we don't stand up and make sure our voices are being counted, if we don't stand up and let this government know that they are accountable to the People's Parliament, we are going to be in serious trouble in this country. We have left a foundation for this government, and I want to know why they're playing games with Cabot. If in fact it is true that you have revoked the Queen's Chain lease for Cabot, why is the project still under construction? Because the golf course is being built on Queen's Chain. So how is it planning approval? And if in fact that you have not done that, then why are you lying to the people of Saint Lucia in saying that you have? I want to see the Sandals project continue. I want to see Rex Resort project continue. I want to see the Point Seraphin Hotel project continue. I want to see the Shock development continue. I want to see Sabasha and Choiseul continue. I want to see the DSH project continue. I want to see the Galaxy project continue. I want to see the Darhair Mall continue. Those are the shovel-ready projects that we've left you that will benefit the people of this Saint Lucia. And I want them to stop lying. There is more land to develop. Foreigners are not coming here displacing people in Saint Lucia. They're coming here to create jobs for us, create opportunities for us, and to put Saint Lucia on the map. Every single major country in the world tries to attract foreign direct investment. This country wants to turn them away. That is wrong, and that needs to change. Why would you have a minister of tourism? The Minister of Tourism had negotiated for cricket to come to Saint Lucia. All the cricket you saw being played in Barbados, the T20s, were supposed to be here in Saint Lucia. He refused to honor the agreement with West Indies cricket, and instead all of those games went to Barbados. And Barbados's hotels are full. They're on TV every single night in England, and we are left with stones to hold. I want to know. You made allegations that our party, and my minister in particular, paid money to bring all the airlift we brought into Saint Lucia. I want you to show one MRG that we did while we were in government. The marketing, I'm seeing no marketing taking place. And more importantly, this is a government that doesn't appreciate the fact that with electricity costs going up, with the cost of inflation going up, it's going to reduce the competitiveness of our businesses, both competing externally and also locally. I want to see the housing projects to continue. I want to see the investment in agriculture to continue. I want to see the new building at St. Jude's continued, and that the people in the South get what they deserve, a world-class hospital. But what we are coming to see as politics or as government these days is a kindergarten. Bullying, name-calling, infantile behavior, immature behavior, disrespect. That is what we're seeing as a government today, and that also has to stop. The fact is, United Workers' Party has left a new standard. And I want to say to you, there's a very dangerous trend that I saw. In the House, again, and I know they were referencing me as being a person who was born with a golden spoon in my mouth. And I want to say, both my parents, my father only has a high school education. My mother only a high school education. And I am proud of the fact that both my parents worked hard, sacrificed in order to give me a better life. And so does that mean that you as a parent who want better for your children, that the moment you give your children better, they no longer are Saint Lucian? That is magie. We have to stop that. There's no place for that kind of rhetoric. I want all Saint Lucians to be educated. I want every parent to sacrifice and sacrifice again to push their children forward. And I want every Saint Lucian to have more than what I have, because you deserve it. I want to end by saying this, that building a new St. Lucia is not a destination. You never know that you arrive. In fact, it's a journey. And the objective of every single government is to push the threshold higher and higher. I want to see the Labour Party do well. I want to see them make Castries South great. I want them to make Marcia great. I want them to make the 2 Vieux-Fort constituencies great. I want to be able to say, wow, boy, those guys really showed me how much they can work. And I want to tip my hat to them. And that if we get the opportunity to govern again, that we want to do better than them. That is what St. Lucians deserve. You don't run a race to hold everybody back. You run a race and you try to do your best to push the next person to do even better than you did before. Why do we celebrate Sir Arthur Lewis and why do we celebrate Derek Walcott? Because what? They were mediocre? No, because they were great. And we want all of our children to be great like them. So I want to put the Labour Party on warning. Stop this tearing down of our country. Genuinely put St. Lucia first. Stop putting yourselves first. Stop tearing down St. Lucia. Stop making us mediocre. We want to be the best in the Caribbean. We want to be one of the best in the world. We want every child to have access to a globally competitive education system. We want everybody to have access to affordable, quality health care. We want every St. Lucian that he or she chooses whether they want to work or not work, that they can open their own business because the country is prospering. We want to be great. We want to build a new St. Lucia, and I am challenging them. Do better than what United Workers' Party did, and if you cannot, do better, know that the People's Parliament is going to hold you accountable. And if you cannot do better, we are going to ask you to leave and let people who can make that happen. Thank you.
We want to thank you for attending the First People Parliament. Give us a round of applause. Good night, and everybody get home safely.